Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name's Olivia, and I'm so glad to welcome all of you today. This is the third gathering of Living One's third series of 2025, A Re-Enchanted World. This is the culmination of this year's Living One theme, Seeing the Unseen, Restoration through Re-Enchantment. For those of you who don't already know, Living One is the Krulos Center for Nonviolence's webinar series, now in its 6th year. The Krulos Center for Nonviolence is a nonprofit dedicated to generating deep commitment and connection with the world and within ourselves, dissolving divides between human, plant, and animal, mind and body, science and spirit, and self and nature. Through teachings, practice, and community, Krulos catalyzes a shift in how we live, relate, and belong, because healing begins when we remember that we were never apart. Our third and final Living One series of 2025, A Re-Enchanted World, continues to explore the unseen, those parts of nature and ourselves obliterated and reduced by commodification. The mercantile, capitalist, realist Cartesian paradigm has supported the scientific, technological, and industrial advances, but stripped our psyches and imaginations, even our very perceptions and understanding of the richly entangled, convivially connected nature of life on our living planet. Living One invites creative and committed people from all around the world to discuss how to change our lives to serve Earth and all of our plant and animal kin. Become a part of Earth revitalization by listening and learning with these amazing speakers. And one of our amazing speakers, our guest today, is Patrick Curry. Patrick is a writer and a scholar living in London. He holds a PhD in the history and philosophy of science from the University College of London and has been a lecturer at the universities of Kent and Bath Spa. He is the author of Defending Middle-earth, Tolkien, Myth and Modernity, Ecological Ethics, Enchantment, Wonder in Modern Life, and most recently, Art and Enchantment, How Wonder Works. He is also the editor-in-chief of the Ecological Citizen, and you can find more information about all of this on Patrick's website. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are all currently on various Indigenous lands. I'm currently on the ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Ojibwa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. This land exists also as a place of trade with other Indigenous communities, including the Ho-Chunk, Miami, Menominee, Sauk, and Meskwaki. The Krulos Center for Nonviolence is located on the homelands of the grizzly bear, takelma, daku-betite, coyote, coho salmon, golden eagle, and gray wolf. Finally, we ask that all of us participate with full respect and attention to each other in the spirit of peace and wisdom that Living One seeks to foster. And now we welcome Izzy and Patrick.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Truly beautiful introduction. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to hand straight over to Patrick, who has a presentation for us today. So you don't have to listen to me wibbling away. And instead, you get the learned and wise words of our guest, Patrick. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. So my subject today is enchantment. I think my working title was What is Enchantment? And of course, to some extent, that's going to mean talking about what enchantment is not, because that's an important part of the essence of enchantment is partly defined by what it's not. I'm not sure if we need an example of enchantment, but I think I will start with a short one. I'm sure we've all had moments of enchantment in our lives. The intensity varies. The lowest level intensity is basically charm. Isn't this a charming situation? Charming dinner we're having together, whatever. Then to up the ante, it can be delight. Okay. Delight, and I don't say pleasure because pleasure and delight don't have quite the same qualities in my mind. So delight is a bit cleaner and a bit sharper than pleasure. And it culminates in what I call radical enchantment, which doesn't actually happen very often, but when it does, it can be quite life-changing. So let me give you an example of radical enchantment that happened to a friend of mine, a close friend of mine. She was approaching her 50th birthday, and as will happen when the first digit of your age changes, feeling a bit upset about it. She was walking in London, where we live, near a park, and she noticed that in the sky there was a bright blue, turquoise blue balloon floating very high up. She happened to be going in the same direction, but it disappeared into the distance. A while later, she noticed it again, and this time it had landed, it was floating on the edge of a pond in the park she was walking in. She was, being this sort of person, she was concerned that since it had long trailing strings, they might become entangled in the feet of the waterfowl in the pond. So she managed to retrieve it, and turning it around, she found on it written the words, "Happy 50th birthday." This can happen, you know. Now I'm not concerned with explanations. I don't want to try and explain that incident. I have no interest in explanation whatsoever. I'm interested in understanding, which is a very different affair from trying to explain something away. Understanding means having a better, deeper apprehension of it as it is, respecting it as it is. So, charm, delight, and joy. Now, what situations does that tend to happen in? So there's huge varieties of enchantment. And in theory, I say in theory, anything and everything can enchant, potentially. Okay. But as a matter of fact, we are a specific kind of animal, just like every other kind of animal, with our uniquenesses and our commonalities. And as all all of us human beings, which is not a universal kind of being, but a particular kind of being, we tend to find certain sites of enchantment, and we tend to have certain sites of enchantment in common. Uh, Classic example of enchantment is falling in love with someone. But also, friendship can be deeply enchanting, parenting can be, and so on. Another site is nature, especially places, wild places, and I don't say wild as an absolute, but as a matter of degree, to the extent it hasn't been completely instrumentalized by human purposes. Art, of course, can be profoundly enchanting. We all have had that experience, I think. Religion can be, especially religious ritual, but also food and drink. Humble sounding, but actually extremely important sources of enchantment in our lives. Um, so, uh, how do I characterize enchantment? Well, the most important thing about it is it's an experience of existential wonder. It's all about wonder. Um, Such as, for example, happens when you have a realization or an encounter with something that's enchanting, and it stops you dead in your tracks. Your mouth might fall open. You're not doing anything. You're just in this state, in this relationship with this enchanting other, okay? This emphasis on wonder implies correctly that the contrast class is will, okay? And by will, I mean things like the will to power, power over, power knowledge, system, instrumentalism, mastery, not in the sense of excellence, but in the sense of dominance. These are all profoundly not enchanting and probably disenchanting. That's the contrast class. Okay. Now, a philosopher I like called Val Plumwood described the project of modernity as, quote, the rational mastery of nature, including human nature. So this places enchantment in an interesting light. It puts it in what it signifies about enchantment is that it is a profoundly non-modern experience. Note that I don't say it's postmodern, and it's certainly not pre-modern. It's got nothing to do with historical periods. The idea that there was a time ever when everything was enchanting is very implausible. And the equally implausible is the idea that there is or was a time when nothing was enchanting. It was total disenchantment. We grumble rightly about the disenchantment of the world at the moment in various respects, all to do with will to power and system and knowledge and dominance. But as a matter of fact, all over the world, people are having amazing meals, falling in love, being carried away by beautiful music, and so on. My screen has just gone black. That's interesting.
It's enchanted.
Can you see me?
I can see you, but
That's interesting.
unfortunately it hasn't given me access to your text.
Okay, no, well, I can't see anybody, and my screen is turned off, and I have no idea why.
We can still see you.
Okay, well, I'll carry on. Kind of weird, but I think I can do that.
You're
Uh,
talking into the ether, but believe us, we are all still here.
okay, fine. So, will, wonder, not will, and it's a non-modern experience. Now, of course, even as a non-modern experience, it can be precipitated by something that is modern. And in this case, I sometimes think of John Betjeman, a wonderful English poet who was responsible for saving the Victorian railway station in London at St. Pancras and stopping it from being knocked down and something else much more hideous being built there. He was totally enchanted by St. Pancras Station in all its gigantic metal and glass glory. Okay. You couldn't get much more modern than that. But he was still having a non-modern experience while he was enchanted by it. Another contrast with enchantment is magic. And of course, this is complex because the word magic is often used in two different, very contradictory ways. One way would be, how was the concert last night? It was magic. Well, what is really meant by that is it was enchanting. And the other usage is, how did he make that happen? He used magic. That's very different. That sort of magic is an exercise of will and mastery. And if you read the definitions of magic by Crowley and Dion Fortune and other practicing magicians, you will see that they all center on will and mastery. Even when it's mastery over yourself, it's still an issue of masteries. That's not enchantment. Okay. Now, another perspective, another way into understanding enchantment is its etymology. It comes from the Latin en, to mean, which means in, and contare, which became in French chant. I forget what it became in French, but basically chantement. That's right, chantement, meaning to sing. So etymologically, the word enchantment means to be in a song or to be in a narrative of any kind by extension, to find yourself in the song that you are, or the story that you are reading or hearing, or the song you are singing, or the song you are hearing sung, or the picture you're looking at. And of course, you can can conceive of your life as a story, a narrative, structured narrative, and you are in the story of your life. So there's a profound baseline potential enchantment already there. Okay. So, right. Um, I want to turn to the fundamental characteristics and dynamics of enchantment that I haven't already mentioned. I think that number one is relationality. It's always relational. It's always involves at least two parties. Okay. Never just one by himself or herself. It's you are enchanted by someone or something. You are in wonder at someone or something. And I say someone because in enchantment, the thing that enchants you becomes a who is enchanted, becomes a person, an honorary person. Okay. Particularly as the intensity of enchantment increases. And not only that, regardless of what or who the enchanting other is, it becomes reciprocal so that you find yourself not only apprehending the other, it might be a whale that you're looking at its eyes and it's looking in your eyes, or it might be a picture even, which is not organic and therefore technically not alive. Nonetheless, you're looking at it and it's looking at you. So it's an encounter. And it's an encounter across a gap of these differences, you see. And it bridges the differences. Now, the differences are not unimportant. They're not to be disregarded and they're not to be wiped out if possible. Actually, you can't have the encounter without the differences. You can't bridge the gap if there is no gap. Without the differences between us and the boundaries, there's actually no enchantment. But if they're too big, if they're too wide or too deep, you can't bridge them. If they're too close, they're effectively one thing and there's no possibility of relationship. So do you see what I'm saying? It's relation, but it's not a relationship that wipes out differences. It transcends differences in the moment of encounter. Encounter, as I've said, with whoever or whatever. So enchantment is non-anthropocentric. It's not limited to other human beings by any means. Okay, and whoever you're in this relationship with, they become a person, but not necessarily a human person, a non-human person, but still a person. That means that enchantment is essentially wild. It's no one party is in charge of what's going on here. If you're in charge of what's going on, enchantment is possible because that's just a dominance. That's just dominance. That's not a real relationship. A real relationship is reciprocal, in which I affect you and you affect me. So enchantment is wild, and as such, it has a sort of a inner affinity or elective affinity with wild nature. The essence of nature being wild, not commodity, but unbiddable, as a friend of mine puts it. No one is in charge. One way to behave in this sort of situation, if you find yourself in this situation, or even if enchantment is part of your life, is to proceed in the way that animism, which of course has deep indigenous roots, but I believe is fundamentally a human mode of operating rather than only an indigenous one. And I define animism as basically a disciplined habit of remaining open to subjectivity or agency, personhood, wherever and whenever it manifests, and regardless of whether or not the other party is technically animate or sentient or whatever. By technically, I mean biologically. That's too restrictive for enchantment. Okay. And the at the heart of this attitude is a term I love from a English woman travel writer, an explorer called Freya Stark. And she advocated that we have the attitude of fearless receptivity. That is the attitude to have towards enchantment and potential enchantment. This all means that when enchantment happens, if it does happen, it happens as a gift, or it doesn't happen at all. There is no entitlement regarding enchantment. It's out of the question. It is pure gift. Now, the relationship, let's go back to that. It very often happens in the form of metaphor. What do I mean by that? Classic treatment of metaphor is, the classic metaphor for understanding it is, Achilles is a lion, end quote. Now there's an exclamation on that, not just a full stop, not just a period, because a metaphor involves a discovery of something new, okay? So by saying Achilles is a lion, we say Achilles, a man, is also a lion. It doesn't mean he stops being a man. So it's paradoxical. So paradox in this context is a good sign. It's a logical sin, but enchantment-wise, it's promising. We're also saying Achilles both is and isn't a man, or not just a man. So say I'm enchanted by a woman, let's say, not impossible. If I'm deeply enchanted, I perceive that woman as a goddess, in effect. Does that mean that she stops being a human woman? No. Very important not to make that assumption. Does that The fact that she's a human woman, does that mean that she can't also be, in effect, a goddess? No, it doesn't. So this tolerance for paradox, what the poet John Keats defined as negative capability, the ability to be in doubts and uncertainty without any irritable reaching after fact and reason, quote. That's a very important attitude when it comes to enchantment. And ultimately, that's why this sort of attitude extends into what Tolkien, who knew a lot about enchantment, um, called he defined enchantment as ultimately, quote, a love and respect for all things animate and inanimate, an unpossessive love of them as other. Uh, pretty good definition. Doesn't leave much important out. It does make room for what W.H. Auden, who incidentally or not was one of Tolkien's students, um, a distinction he made between true and false enchantment. It's pretty interesting. So Auden said, with true enchantment, you just want the enchanting other to flourish, to be happy, to be well. That's it. False enchantment, you either want to possess them or be possessed by them. It's interesting he calls it false enchantment because it implies that, yes, it is some kind of enchantment. It has the power of enchantment, but it's a false enchantment, which will lead you and or the other party astray. Issue of possessiveness. Okay. Alongside relationality, a very important idea defined is the way Max Weber defined enchantment. He called it concrete magic. A lot in that term. There's a lot packed into it. The point of it is enchantment is both of these things. It is both concrete in the sense of it never happens in some ineffable, transcendent heaven or other realm. It's always in very precise, earthbound circumstances. It's always completely an embodied experience. That makes it perhaps different from other kinds of spiritual experiences. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But enchantment is always embodied and embedded and circumstantial. And at the same time, it's completely mysterious, ineffable, and spiritual. In moments of enchantment, those two are not contradictory and they don't cancel each other out. So if Weber is right, and I believe he is, and enchantment is concrete magic, that means it's an experience that is both mental and physical. It's both spiritual and material. It's both subjective and objective. It's both transcendent and immanent, and so on. Okay. It's not either in an either or with those alternatives, which we have been drilled in over thousands of years in this originally Platonic split, and then Descartes came along and upped the ante 1,000-fold. This split between supposedly spirit, or later became mind, and matter. Okay, you could have one or the other, but you couldn't have both. In the context of enchantment, this is a very, very destructive question. Well, which is it? Is it spiritual or is it material? Is it mental or is it physical? You don't ask that question. That will destroy the enchantment, of course, and any possibility of understanding it. That's why I talk about refraining from, when you're trying to understand enchantment, refraining from reductionist approaches to it. One reduction is reducing it up to God. Okay. Another reduction is reducing it down to neurophysiology. These are going to be one-sided. It's always both of these alternatives. The reason it's both, you could say, is enchantment as concrete magic is upstream, a metaphor I love from a phenomenologist called Henri Bourtoft. Enchantment is upstream of the distinction between these things, okay, or between these two sets of qualities, okay. So one thing Gregory Bateson said was, along the same lines, these two species of this is a quote, these two species of superstition, these rival epistemologies, on the one hand, the supernatural, and on the other hand, the mechanical, feed each other. And by implication, of course, very much for Bateson, they're both wrong. They are both one-sided, and enchantment brings that to light. So when you read about enchantment these days, you very often find it's reduced to supernaturalism, which is, as I said, reduction up, or more often it's reduced down to neurophysiology, which is the materialist solution. And they cannot understand enchantment as it is because it only works as concrete magic. It just escapes them. They're, in the words of the old Irish joke, if you want to get there, I wouldn't start from here. This is not the place to start from. It also follows that enchantment is participatory, or if we want to be fancy, we could say it's ontological. In other words, what that means is it's about a way of living. It's not merely about a way of knowing or observing, which is usually called philosophically epistemology. It's not just epistemology. It's a way of living, an experience of life that only an embodied living being can have, I believe. The implication of that is that animals can experience enchantment. Other animals, non-human animals. Don't see why that's a problem. It also means that when it happens, it feels mythic. Okay, it feels mythical. When you're having an experience of enchantment, you're living mythically. And when you're living mythically, well, not necessarily enchantment. There's considering let's say, the classical Greek pantheon of gods, many of them are profoundly powerful and mythical, but have absolutely nothing to do with enchantment. Far from it. Think of Ares, the god of war, or Zeus for that matter. The divinities, this is a bit of a segue, which I hadn't intended, but I'll just do it for a minute. The divinities in the Greek pantheon that have an integral or an elective affinity with enchantment are Hermes, who is the one who precisely crosses those boundaries that I have been speaking of. Hermes' function, his role, his métier, is to link together by crossing boundaries, crossing worlds, taking messages between one world and another. And Aphrodite, Hermes and Aphrodite. Aphrodite is such that when she walks into a room, and she's not trying to do this, everybody in the room, man or woman, falls in love with her immediately and deeply. That's just the effect she has, okay? So in that sense, she is the principle of enchantment, and there's no will involved necessarily. The same set of considerations means that when you have an experience of enchantment, it feels deeply personal, as obviously the balloon example that I started with does. It feels deeply personal, and it's meaningful. Its meaning it's obvious, the meaning to you. Okay, it's deeply meaningful, and in that sense, it feels fateful. Okay, it doesn't feel it feels the opposite of random or contingent or meaningless, arbitrary. Those are experiences of disenchantment. And when it happens, it's never something that happens. It's not something that happens in time. It's a moment. So the Greek distinction there, because the Greeks had a name for everything, is it's a matter of kairos, a moment, not chronos, time. Okay. Time, all the same, quantifiable, uniform. That's disenchanted time. Okay. A moment is just the moment. And in that moment, time does usually, very often, slows radically down. Okay. It would be inaccurate to say it stops altogether, although it can seem to stop for a moment, but it doesn't actually stop. It just gets very, very slow. And also it's not only a moment, it happens in a particular place, okay, as in concrete magic. And so by place, I mean what the Greeks called chora, as opposed to topos, which is space. It doesn't happen in space. It happens in a place, a particular place. And there's a lovely quote by an American novelist, John Crowley, um, about enchanted places. When he said, the farther in you go, the bigger it gets. Now, in disenchanted space, the farther in you go, so to speak, the smaller everything gets. Okay, because you're looking at it from the outside. It's this little particular thing. But when have an enchanted relationship with place, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until Crowley says it's infinite, or actually almost infinite. Why are these qualifications? Time slows but doesn't stop, and space and place becomes almost infinite, but not completely infinite. Why are these important? Well, the fact is that enchantment always, this is another very important aspect of it, it always passes. It doesn't last forever, and it doesn't extend everywhere. It can't. If it did, it would become universal and singular, as God is often understood to be, and then it would stop being enchanting because there would be no contrast class with it. No contrast in your life, in your experience, in your mind. When enchantment is happening, you know that something very special is happening. And it probably has something to tell you, or you have something to learn from it in any case. So universalism and monism, as in monotheism, would wipe that out because there'd be no contrast with it. You can't have something that's special unless it's special against a background of stuff that isn't special. Okay. Of just this thing about learning. It's that's an important aspect of enchantment as well. It often has something to tell us, so to speak. It's an experience of truth. There is a truth happening that is something that affects you, that involves you, that you can learn about or learn from this experience. I'm not suggesting you can use the experience. If you try using it, it will vanish. Okay. Consider it in this respect, as in many others, a wild thing. You can't use a wild thing while it's still wild, but you can certainly learn from it. So, insofar as enchantment is an experience of truth, it's actually not so much like casting a spell on us or on you or on me. It's more like waking up. You're waking up to something that you've forgotten. Okay. This business about enchantment is casting a spell. It shows up a lot in dictionary and encyclopedia definitions of enchantment, and it's usually followed by something about the danger of delusion, of being deluded by enchantment. And if you read between the lines, it sounds like a particularly male fear, because supposedly the enchantress, always a woman, always a female, is casting a spell on you. And this is dangerous, and you should try and get away or wake up with it. This says a lot more about men and about human beings than it does about enchantment. I think profoundly enchantment is a waking up, not succumbing to a spell. And what is the truth? What is the truth that you are perceiving that you had forgotten? Okay. One way to put it would be the enchantment wakes you up to the intrinsic value of the other, the enchanting other, whoever and whatever it is. By intrinsic value, I mean the inherent value of that person, or in effect, person. that has absolutely nothing to do with cash value or use value or instrumental value or value on the market. Absolutely nothing, okay? But the true value of that person, that animal, that human, that place, that wild place, cannot be captured in dollars and pounds. The true value of the work of art that is holding you gripped, and so on, okay? In this sense, a slight refinement of what I've just said, enchantment is an awakening to life, to the intrinsic value of life and of being alive against a spell. It's awakening from a spell. And the spell it can awaken you from is the spell of modernist disenchantment, which says nothing means anything much. Everything's more or less the same. When you've seen one of these, as Ronald Reagan famously said about redwood trees, you've seen them all. And that culminates in despair and nihilism because nothing has any value. That's the true spell that we are under, that enchantment can wake us from. Now, it may be hard to accept in a way that enchantment passes, but I think it's very important to accept it because it's intrinsic to enchantment. And the fact that, okay, so why does enchantment always pass? Well, one simple way to understand it is if we're talking about concrete magic, the concrete part of the compound, this the actual circumstances, okay, they're always changing. So the concrete circumstances that lent themselves to that moment of enchantment, slowly or quickly, but sooner or later for sure, will change into something else not enabling to the enchantment. So this places enchantment in a strong contrast to, say, a lot of claims by the big religions that they are dealing with eternal, universal, singular truth. The episode that brings this to mind for me is, I think it might be John chapter 4, is Jesus encounters a woman at a well, getting water from the well, and they're talking about water, and he says, almost exactly, not quite, if you drink from the water I bring, you will never be thirsty again. Now, I have nothing to say about that. I'm not qualified. It's well beyond my pay scale to say yes or no to that. But I will say that that's not enchantment. That's not how enchantment works. In this sense, you will be thirsty again, or you can be thirsty again. And there's no denying that with enchantment. That means that the ability to let go of it when it's over is very important. Clinging is not a good look, not least because it doesn't work. It never works. Ironically, perhaps, the ability to let go of enchantment when it's over doesn't require a weak or waffly ego, so like a whoa whoa kind of thing. It requires a very strong ego to do that. And sometimes you can't do it, and it just withdraws from you. And there's just nothing you can do at all. Right. How am I doing for time? How am I doing for time?
It's up to you. It's any time in the next 5 minutes. You can have 10 minutes, but it's totally up to
Okay.
you, Patrick.
Okay, I'll carry on for about another, hopefully not much more than 10 minutes. Um, so I understand enchantment as instances of life or experiences of life and of being alive. So they can facilitate, they can't be used this way, but they can have this effect. They can result in a deep appreciation of being alive and a drive to become more fully alive. They are essentially other acknowledging, okay? They're not narcissist, the opposite of narcissistic. They're not anthropocentric. They don't, enchantment doesn't care who the other is, whether it's technically possible for it to have a relationship with you or not, not relevant. Okay. It leads to can lead to an awareness of vulnerability and therefore humility and kindness, and a stronger ability to be receptive, to exercise what I called earlier negative capability. These are all good things, not to mention unpossessive love. These are gifts, okay, that enchantment can bring, and they should be defended as part of a good human life, a flourishing human life. Um, to be understood against this cult or culture of death, which I'm not going to go into, but which is evident in certain extreme manifestations of fundamentalist religion. It's better to be dead and therefore, in theoretically, in heaven than it is to be on this earth. And certainly in the fantasies about immortality on the part of the tech bros and billionaires who are terrified of dying, rejecting the fact that death is an essential part of life. And so they want to, what they think of as being immortal, by what they mean by that is live forever, which is not the same thing as immortality, as Tolkien pointed out. And basically, the end result of their efforts, to the extent that their efforts succeed, will be that they become ring wraiths. I don't know how well you know the Lord of the Rings, but the ring wraiths just live forever, what Tolkien called endless serial living, which is a terrible, terrible thing to have to experience because you're terrified of dying and you're desperate to die. To the extent they succeed. So they really are lost. Right. I want to close by saying some things about re-enchantment. Be careful with the idea of re-enchantment. There's a number of mistakes you can make along the way. Does it assume that the world now is disenchanted? If you have to re-enchant the world, then the implication seems to me pretty clear that currently it's disenchanted. Really? For whom? It's certainly not disenchanted for everybody. As I said earlier, people falling in love, enjoying art, encounters with nature, etc. It's all still happening here and there. So that would be a wrong assumption. It isn't a period of time. There was no, it's not pre-modern or post-modern. As I said already, it's non-modern. Second assumption could make is, do we really think that the world, what, all of it, can be re-enchanted by an act of will, whether it's individual desire for re-enchantment or collective? But that's the opposite of enchantment. If it would happen that if only all good people just tried hard enough and succeeded and followed the program, the re-enchantment program, everything would be fine because we'd all be re-enchanted. That's ridiculous. Okay. Runs totally counter to enchantment. Actually, a program for re-enchantment is a kind of disenchantment under the wrong name. Even if it succeeded, total universal re-enchantment, it would fail as enchantment. So by now you might be thinking, well, what the heck can we do? That would be understandable. But there are things we can do to encourage enchantment, which is all you can do with a wild thing. You know, if you capture a wild thing, like let's say a deer, and force it into a relationship with you, as it were, it's not wild anymore. So you failed. All you can do with a wild thing is be around it long enough to reassure it that you're not going to shoot it. And maybe it will honor you in the manner of a gift with a relationship, holding up its end of a relationship with you, despite the fact that you're human and it's not. Okay. And you get to know each other a little better and you learn things. Okay. You should approach re-enchantment the same way, with the same delicacy. So, what we can do vis-a-vis enchantment or re-enchantment, you can be open to enchantment as a principle, in a principled sort of way. Make it a habit to be open to it wherever and whenever and as whatever you encounter it. Okay. You can encourage enchantment by helping to create conditions that it likes. What are those conditions? It likes liminal conditions. It likes that space not too big and not too small between differences. Okay. So it doesn't like chaos and sort of orgasmic unity in which there's no boundaries. Burning Man stuff, not enchanting. And it doesn't like hyper control, the opposite, hyper control, micromanagement of anything, say in education, say in agriculture, say in healing. No, that's not conducive to enchantment either. It likes the loose and the liminal. And if you're going to think about it, try and think about it respectfully and carefully, which is sort of what all my work is about. And don't forget fearless receptivity. Great term. Okay, I think that's probably enough. Anybody there? I can't see you.
Izzy, we can't hear you for some reason. Strange. She is unmuted, but we can't seem to hear the words. Izzy, give me a thumbs up if you want to talk, or should I go to questions?
Let me see. Can you hear me now?
You're all set.
Okay, that's all right then. Thank you so much, Patrick. That was absolutely wonderful. And I'm hoping that we might be able to go to questions from the audience, because I saw Eileen flashing something onto her screen at one point, which made me think that she had something to say. I know Anne has done the exercise. And we have with us also Ralph Akampora, who was a speaker in our first series this year, who shares your affinity for Maurice Merleau-Ponty. So I'm hoping that Ralph might have a comment as well. But Anne or Eileen, whichever of you is first to unmute. No, not Eileen. Anne, would you like to tell us about your practice of enchantment, my 5-star student?
Sure. Yes, I wasn't prepared. So give me a quick second. So what I've come to understand just over the last couple of days, the experience of enchantment was I happened to be on my back porch, and my backyard is full of native plants and a pond. And so it always feels really good to be on the porch. And but I was paying bills, which is not like an enchanting process, at least not for me. And all of a sudden, I heard these birds screaming, and I looked over, and there were 2 baby wrens clinging to the screen about 4 feet from where I was sitting. And one of them looked a little bolder, and it looked a little bit older. The other one still had tufts of hair of baby fuzz on top of her head. And I didn't want to breathe. These 2 baby birds, and they're screaming, and I'm imagining why they're screaming. They're screaming because there's something wrong. No, they're screaming because they just left home, because the world is a big bad place, because they were flying and hit the screen. I don't know. But I start looking for their parents, and I don't see their parents. And then I said, oh, there's nothing wrong. They're just leaving home for the first time. Mom and dad are around somewhere. So I watched them, and that idea of time slowing down, they stayed on the screen for a long time. And then I got up and went over and put my face next to the one with the fuzziness on top of her head and just started talking to her, and she stopped screaming. And then the first one flew over to the house, which, maybe 15 feet away, and clung on to the bricks. And then this little baby moved over to the screen door, I don't know, 8 feet away, and perched on the screen door again. And so I walked over and put my finger up near her feet, and it was like she touched my fingers, and we just kept talking, and she was quiet. And then she flew over to the bricks and started screaming again. Like this was a whole nother experience. The brick was different. It was a new thing. And then they both flew. The one went first. I made up that it was a big brother and a little sister, but of course, who knows? Went first to a wisteria vine on a trellis, and then to the woods. And I had just read the email with the experience we were to do. So I immediately wrote it up and sent it to Izzy so that I would capture this experience while it was fresh. Uh,
Oh, nice.
but then I started thinking about all of the other times that there's some experience of enchantment for me. The hummingbirds that come through our yard. Often a hummingbird will come right to the screen and look straight in at us. And I imagine that they're saying, hey, thanks. We really appreciate there's stuff for us to eat here and drink and you know, and it happens more often than I imagine. I don't know, once a week at least, that a hummingbird will come and apparently talk to us. Um, Yesterday, I went out to get the mail. Our mailboxes on the side of our house, and there's this little plastic orange frog. I don't know, like an inch wide. It's sitting on top of the mailbox. I don't know why. I thought it had a leaf on it, and I went to dislodge the leaf. It wasn't a leaf; it was a moth. And the moth flies up, and I jump back, and we just had this momentary, oh, you're alive. Oh, you too. And then the moth flies off, and I was like, wow. So I began thinking that all of those little experiences are experience of enchantment that um, they're they're amazing and they're not, right? Like,
Puts it very well.
yeah. So anyway, I very much appreciate your talk and the exercise and the fact that I happened to have my computer right there when the baby birds, because that could have happened and then I wouldn't have written it down and wouldn't have remembered it. So I appreciate the exercise. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I want my classmates to know that I wasn't going for points because as he sent that out to everyone, I was like, oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah, I immediately made her the swot of the class, and so no one's friends with Anne anymore. Sorry.
She does get a gold star.
She does. She does get a gold star. Is if I have any hands up at the moment, if anyone wants to specifically ask something. But I was thinking what you were talking about with time slowing down in these moments of enchantment, and also the feeling of meaningfulness. And I was thinking also about something similar happening during accidents. When you're in a car crash, I've been in far too many of, and falling off horses, things like that. That time seems to slow down very much in those moments as well. And I was thinking about that. The feeling of risk that then you can start to seek thrills, bungee jumping, or climbing, diving off deep huge cliffs or something like that. Is there some kind of connection between the phenomenology of what's happening in a risk situation and an enchantment situation that then leads you to sort of seek something akin to that in risk-taking behaviors?
No, I can honestly say that's something I've never thought about. So it is certainly possible. It's obviously possible what you're saying, that you could seek out that experience. But I think the fact that you're seeking it out changes the quality of the experience. What I've been emphasizing is receptivity and gift and so on. Whereas if you're going looking for it, well, you will find something, but I very much doubt that you will find enchantment that way. And an example of that is, don't know if you've ever read Aldous Huxley's essay, The Doors of Perception, about when he took mescaline in 1954,
Yeah.
late 50s. And it's a absolutely classic account by somebody unusually articulate of a full-blown experience of enchantment. There's no doubt about that. But part of the reason why it was a full-blown account of enchantment and not of not simply a drug experience was his motive. His motive was incredibly pure. He just had a deep intellectual curiosity about what would happen if he took this substance. He wasn't taking it in order to have a certain kind of experience that he already anticipated. He wasn't taking it in order to get high, et cetera, et cetera. That all changes the quality of the experience, and I would say moves it away from enchantment.
And for you, I wanted to bring this up because you've written a lot about ecology, the environment, and as Olivia read at the beginning, an editor of the Ecological Citizen, the journal. So and I know that you have mentioned that experiences of nature can often be enchanting, but do you see there is a close interweaving between those two interests of yours? How do they align?
Well, I think enchantment, or nature has an affinity with enchantment in two senses. It can be the object of, or the other subject of an enchanting relationship, as in a non-human animal or a particular place, wild place, and so on. But in another more, gosh, I almost want to say ontological sense, every single experience of enchantment is an experience by nature and of nature. It's an enormously enhanced awareness of being a natural being, having a natural experience with another natural being, and so in a way the whole thing is nature at the same time as the specifics can be or may or may not be nature. And this, to me, it also relates to what I call the elective affinity or the inherent affinity between enchantment as wild and nature as wild. Uh, in the end, they become the same thing. And so you can hardly overestimate the importance of nature in this sense.
And Eileen, I see you have your hand up, but I just wanted to just sort of pursue this just a tiny bit further. So, do you think that in the important in the risks that the world faces at the moment with biodiversity loss and climate change and extinctions and so forth, do you think that there is a place for this open receptiveness to enchantment and I'm not suggesting the utilization of it, but that openness, sorry.
It's okay. I'm really perhaps going out a bit on a limb here, but I mean, that's second nature to me. Um, I think, and I'm on record as saying that without enough people, almost certainly minority, but enough people, whatever number that might be, having a personal experience of the intrinsic value of nature or natural items, let's say. All the enlightened policies, economic policies, political interventions, green technology, all of that, everything else will not suffice in the end to save us from ourselves. I think it will all fail. So if I'm right, these experiences are terribly, terribly important. And really in particular in our educational systems, we ought to be providing opportunities for them to happen much, much more than we are.
Thank you. Eileen, you've taken your hand down again. I didn't want to. I
just think it's rude to have it up while people are talking.
Oh, bless you.
Well, thank you for your talk. I've been thinking throughout this whole time and about, you can't create a moment of enchantment. And I'm not sure that's true because I think just stillness and quiet, we can then find moments of enchantment. I remember as a child laying for hours watching ants go in and out of their hole and just being astounded by them.
Yeah.
But the other question I have, well, two actually. One is the risk-taking behavior, because I'm not quite sure what was meant by that, but I have had instances where it seemed like there's going to be harm, and without thinking, I intervene, and a non-human animal is responsive to that intervention, which is to protect them.
Sure.
I don't know if that means that there's a connection there for sure. I think Anne was talking about birds, and up until this past year, for the last 12 years, we've had a robin couple, that pair that have been in our yard. And just observing them, when they were young, they weren't so great. And the poor father would stand on the wall and scream. He didn't know what to do. And they just got better and better every year. And one of them, I think the male passed away this year. And had been a big storm, and being able to put the chicks back, there was that moment of connection, even though the parents weren't there. I felt like I'm putting them where they can be found again. The same things happen when I've had a wild bird fly into my house. And, it's horrible to try and have to catch them because they're so scared. But then they'll just look at me and kind of take a few breaths, and in a few moments just fly off. Like, it's on to life. But my question was about just, I'm not sure that there can be what you were describing, what I understood you to be describing as a purely enchanted experience, or a pure enchantment where you don't seek it out or you don't try and make it happen, because of the observer effect. The fact that we're there changes what is happening. Us being in that space, changes what's happening. So is it ever really pure?
You definitely have to be present for enchantment to happen. You have to, as it were, hold up your end of the conversation.
Right.
But how you do it, the attitude you do it with, makes a huge difference. And you don't need to do it with the attitude of, I'm intervening. I want this to happen and not that to happen, etc. You can be circumspect. I don't think that's impossible. And that's all that's, in a sense, all that's required. About the experiences with the birds you mentioned, I think every time there's a connection like that, no matter how tiny, enchantment attends it. I'm quite sure of that. As for being able to create, I would have to respectfully disagree with you. We cannot create enchantment. I think when you sit still, as in meditating, for example, some kinds of meditation, you're creating the opportunity for enchantment to happen.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But if we could create enchantment, then it would be an exercise of will, and it would immediately fall under the aegis of system and power, knowledge, and so on, all of which is profoundly disenchanting. So I think all we can do is create the opportunity and keep the door open, and decide to work with it if and when it happens, but we can't make it happen.
That makes sense. I mean, yes, that's what I think I meant by the stillness and quiet is creating that fertile ground for it, for something to sprout.
Yeah, openness. You're creating openness, aren't you? Or as well as being open yourself. I mean, yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. But I do believe in because of some of my training that, just the fact of our being there, or as Gay taught to me many, many, many years ago, sometimes just bearing witness is what's called for. And that is something that has been very prominent in my mind during these political times. We can do what we can to affect change and keep the hope alive that democracy will still exist and we will find peace and save the planet and things like that. But if we can't, just bearing witness has value.
Yeah, I agree.
So just to follow up with that, in bearing witness, if the other being doesn't know you're there, but your experience is one of enchantment, is that possible, or is it something
Yes.
else?
Oh God, this is so funny you said that, because I'm sorry to just cut you off like that, but as part of my therapy and healing work from a lot of trauma, the I always had the question when I was alone in a hospital room and it was dark, if no one sees me and no one hears me, do I exist? It's sort of like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound? We don't know, because the observer effect already changes the situation just by us being there. But it is a question I wonder. Is it an enchanted incident if we're not witnessing it? And if they don't know we're witnessing it, I think yes, because if the planet, we're going to destroy ourselves and the planet, it's epigenetic. There are epigenetic changes when we go through those kinds of traumas. And by witnessing it, even if the other doesn't know, I have lived to tell the story. It's in my DNA there, where if I connect to it, maybe there's quantum entanglement. So there's some vibration that then that energy is important, even if the other doesn't know that they're being witnessed. In my case with the hospital, yes, it made a difference, but I still think that it's important to bear witness as part of the story of humanity, even when it's horrific.
Perhaps it's a bit of a stretch, but I think when you are bearing witness in the way you've described, and not for anybody else that you're aware of, there is a relationship you've embarked on with the connection is, the metaphor is, on one end of the relationship is you, the person of you, and at the other end is witnessing, or the witness, and you're connecting the two, and it allows us for a certain degree, I think, of internal enchantment, so to speak. As for the question, was it you, Gay, who asked me? Can you what was it? Anne, sorry.
Yeah.
Can enchantment happen if the other party is not aware of it?
Yeah.
I think with the low, as it were, not to disparage it, but low level enchantment, as in what I call charm, I think that's perfectly possible when I'm having a charming meal with a friend in a restaurant. I'm not sure the restaurant is aware of me doing that. But as it gets more intense, it requires, I think, participation on the other end as well. That's what I personally believe.
Thank you. I've seen Ralph's had his hand up for a little while, so I want to give him the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So, Patrick, you just delivered a wonderful, fascinating phenomenology, and I find myself most curious about the sort of dance between transcendence and immanence in the experience of enchantment. I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, thank you. And it is a phenomenology. You're absolutely right. That was what I consider that I'm doing. With enchantment, and I, as usual, I'm not trying to lay down the law about any other kind of human experience. I'm just talking about this one. There is no transcendence in the usual sense of the word, of rising above circumstances. if anything, it's the opposite. And what you are doing is you are entering into the circumstances more fully and more deeply, the present exact circumstances. You're entering into them more deeply in an immanent sort of way. The feeling of doing that is transcendent, but it's a kind of, so to speak, internal transcendence. And of course, a lot of Merleau-Ponty's later philosophy, in Invisible and the Invisible, is about this treating the imagination as an organ of apprehension, which enables you to apprehend what he called something like the inner lining and meaning of circumstances. So you're going into the circumstances, and the farther in you go, as I said, the bigger it gets. So I would say it's ultimately immanent, but there is a kind of transcendent quality to it. That's why I want to call it internal transcendence.
Mm. Thank you.
Mm.
I think that notion of depth is one that that sort of strikes me as being of such particular importance. I'm going to ask a question from Mike in the chat just briefly in a moment, but I've been doing this job, a sort of online job, to earn a little bit of extra cash to keep my cats in the style to which they've become accustomed. And it's looking at AI videos and AI images. So the AI is either representing audio or representing an image or representing a video, or it's making up its own videos. And the thing that's really notable about it is a lack of depth. You know, it can't in depth in any sense. So the depth, spatial depth, it really struggles with, but any kind of depth of meaning is just not there. Things are entirely surface. And I think that in the broadest possible sense, that idea of depth is something that we risk losing hold of, and that I particularly feel worried about. And I think that metaphor is something that helps us to regain depth. Mike says to compare monotheism and animism in the sphere of enchantment.
Yeah, that was a pretty sharp distinction I was drawing, wasn't it? I mean, it certainly suggests itself, because monotheism is one person, Barbara Herrnstein Smith, defined it as the effort to identify the putatively one true way and impose it, one true universal way, and impose it universally. And the problem with mono anything being that we're such a ornery, contrary, perverse animal, and you could say that life itself is like that there's always going to be people and experiences and other things which don't fit the pattern if the pattern is specified. Of course, if the pattern is not specified, if nothing follows from monotheism, for example, then it doesn't make any difference. You can forget about it. But if the pattern is specified, which it has to be in order to mean anything, then there's going to be stuff that doesn't fit and will be forced into it. And that is, of course, absolutely the opposite of enchantment, which is respectful of the other and appreciative of the other. And animism is a way of life that incorporates that respectfulness into, as you walk along the path of life, you are open to others and otherness respectfully, as you would be in any relationship that you want to last.
Thank you. I want to call into the room in both vision and sound Ms. Gay Bradshaw, because I know that Gay had a question. She might have her camera off briefly while tending one of the animals. I will give her. Here she is. No, nearly.
I'm lurking.
You're lurking. So I wanted you to ask the questions that you had for Patrick, Gay.
Well, thank you. That's lovely. I actually have. You can't see me now. Hang on.
Patrick can't see you at all because his screen's gone.
Oh, okay.
My monitor's
okay. I have pages here. I'll just right now that comes to mind is I'll share an experience of what I would call enchantment, and then I have kind of a wonk question for you, so you can choose which one you want first. I'll do the story because that's more fun and interesting. I spent quite a bit of time off and on in Santa Barbara. I was there as an undergraduate, and then I stayed on, and and then I came back and was at this NSF thing, and every time I go to Santa Barbara, it is purely what I would call, from your description, enchantment. Everything is sparkling, and I don't mean like glitzy. It's just, I feel magical. It's just that everything happens. Everything is just, like, I don't know how to say it. It's just sort of like, Tinkerbell's little wand. It just does this. Everything has this sort of sparkle and magic about it. That's the best I can describe it. And so for me, I've always had in sort of the back of my mind is this notion of, maybe it's person specific or whatever, with place, or I hate to even, break it up into those kinds of things, but I definitely feel different. It's, I don't even know if it's body experience or not experience, and it lasts as long as I'm there, which sometimes has been years and sometimes has been, a week or a few days or things like that. So I just wanted to share that, Patrick.
Can I speak to that before we go on to the second
Yeah,
part?
yeah, no.
Sure. Well, see, I characterize space as being uniform and quantitative, meaning that any bit of space is the same as any other bit of space.
Uh-huh.
That may be a vulgar misunderstanding from a strict physics point of view, but that's pretty much the concept that people have, I think. Place, then, if place is the contrary of that, then it follows that some places are going to be more enchanting than others. They're not going to be all the same. They're not uniform. And I'm quite sure that there are certain places which are powerfully enchanting, more so than others, and Santa Barbara may well be one of them. At the same time, there may be something about you that it particularly enables you to apprehend the enchantment of Santa Barbara to a greater extent than somebody else. There's nothing implausible about that either. So what I want to avoid is the idea, which I think is an example of raging human exceptionalism and privilege, that you only find Santa Barbara enchanting because you are projecting enchantment onto it, or you're, you know what I mean? This thing that the thing itself, the place itself, means nothing and has no particular properties and is random. I totally reject that idea. So there is something about Santa Barbara which enables you to find it enchanting.
Well, that segues to another thing I was going to ask you, which you have somewhat, discussed and responded to. You made the statement, that's a horrible thing to say, and then usually the but comes in. But you said, enchantment is wild. And so I wanted to say is that my own experience, and I'm going to use enchantment in quotation marks because that's what I would call it, given what you've described, is with quote unquote nature. And so if enchantment is wild, that's where I find, and again, I can't even describe it. It's just that everything is a buzz. Everything is just, Leonard Cohen, right? Magic is afoot. And that is, for me, an everyday experience when I get out of this, mess called the mind. You know what I mean? And everything is just sort of sparkling and just intensity. It's just, so it's it's like I said, I think, for example, for Santa Barbara has been, like, for example, for me, I think that part of the or the unfeeling or connection and being in enchanting with everything that, and whom is, every whom I'm with, is more of, my mind state, because I end up, focusing on taking care of the animals in a certain way and taking care of the trees and the land. And so it becomes, in a sense, like you would call it, instrumentalism, what do I do to da 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 da. But when I can let go and be in that space of, this leads to my question to you, of no self, where I'm not in the mind and I'm not, concerned with me doing this and that. To me, that is enchantment. And that for me is quote unquote place independent. I think Santa Barbara partly is because has been in my life when I've gone there, is just this very free in the sense of no responsibilities, no kind of, demand, even though I was involved in various kinds of things. But I think there is something in terms of, there is no space. So anyways, I don't want to get into that, but to me, I guess I'm asking you, I would say that in my perception, that if you said enchantment is wild, that the entire cosmos, plants, animals, what we call these things, and we're just sort of unplugged. Yeah. But I think enchantment is constant. I think that's how all the animals and trees that I meet as such, are in the enchantment world. I think they walk around in enchantment. So I guess that's what my thing is. I think they're constantly enchantment. Not that they don't do their jobs, but they're constantly, connected in an enchanted kind of way, because they're so receptive to beauty and they're so receptive to being alive. You know what I mean? So there's a vitality that is just springing forth no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah. So I see I understand what you're saying. I would say we have to be careful thinking about this aspect of things, this like every other aspect, because although enchantment may be universal and unlimited, we are not, and dragonflies are not, and beavers are not, and trees are not. They're all particular. We're all particular beings. So we just don't do permanent transcendence or permanent anything or universal anything. It's not an option for us as the kind of animal we are. So you're going to hook in and out of it. It's not going to be a constant in one's experience. And it's the experience of enchantment that interests me. So one could hypothesize that enchantment is a constant universal aspect of the universe. Fine. But that has no, what William James said in a deliberately vulgar metaphor, that idea has no cash value. You can't cash it in a meaningful way. It doesn't really mean a great deal. What means a great deal is our actual experiences, which are particular experiences in particular places at particular times. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say and try.
Well, that leads to my wonky kind of question. In another arena, we'll call it that way. Mm-hmm. Arenas, people talk about non-dualism, and David Bohm, the implicate explicate order, all of that was under that umbrella with that terminology. Mm-hmm. So question A I had for you is what is that dialogue for you? You know what I mean? If someone comes up, like moi, for example, and talks about non-dualism or Buddhist non-self or whatever, what is that relationship to the dialogue? I don't know how else to put it. You know what I mean? With enchantment.
Right. Incidentally, before I forget, a good person to read about enchantment is Martin Buber, I and Thou. There's somebody who really, really nailed enchantment.
Okay. Yeah.
If you pardon me putting it that way. So the thing about enchantment is, as I said earlier, but perhaps didn't emphasize sufficiently, it doesn't destroy boundaries, and it doesn't depend on the destruction of boundaries. It simply relativizes them. So it's not a question of no self. The self still exists. The ego still exists, but it's not dominating. It's not driving things anymore in a state of enchantment. That's because it is in a relationship and with another. And in any genuine relationship, as I also said, no one's in charge. No one party's in charge. If they are, then it's not a relationship. So the wildness means that in this case, I'm not sure what this is. I've never been absolutely sure what non-dual means. Okay. Perhaps it's not one and not two.
Well, my definition is it's just removes what dualism imposes.
Well, that's true, but that doesn't mean there's no duality. It means that the duality is not a dualism anymore.
Well, it's not like you said, it's not the defined. It becomes more secondary, tertiary,
Yes, that's right. That's
and
right.
in other words, that's where as you put it earlier about the paradox, I think you used a beautiful phrase, the tolerance for paradox, right?
Yes,
In that
that was
way. So, I
John
mean, that's how
Keats.
I
Yeah.
see like the explicit, implicate, the way David Bohm was,
Right.
trying to talk about it. And obviously we have our form. And I mean, I love the way you say that. I mean, that to me, that's the whole notion is that form informs, but it doesn't define. You know what I mean? It's just kind of something there.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. That's right. Yeah. That's
I was just
oh,
wondering because the whole, is we're working at, kind of bringing in, as an antidote to the way things have been dominating,
oh yeah, yeah.
using terminology and concepts, and they don't all have to agree, but I just wanted to know what you're feeling. What I'm saying is that there's a
Along
one
along the same
kind of
lines.
pathway where people are talking about non-dualism and things like that, and how would you have a dialogue and talk about that in terms of, bringing, not necessarily bringing them together, but having them in that kind of same kind of
Well,
dialogue.
on the one hand, I don't believe thinking is a problem. I don't believe that being rational is a problem. Thinking and being rational is as natural as breathing, running, playing a musical instrument, brushing your teeth. It's another thing that human beings do. Okay? Rationalism is a problem. The idea that the rational or rationality exhausts the whole thing, that's a big problem. Now, so I don't think that thinking is necessarily disenchanting, or even being rational is necessarily disenchanting. But in terms of the thinking or the rationales that we use to communicate, specific ones like, say, quantum physics, well, quantum physics just absolutely doesn't do it for me. I don't know why. It's probably temperament.
I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
Quantum physics is not a particular rationale that I can relate to at all.
Oh, that you cannot. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. It just doesn't suit me. It's probably temperamental, and another person it would be fine. Um, and so similar with non-dual, I just don't want to talk about non-dual because I don't know what it means, and I've never been able to figure out what it means. So it makes me sort of like cautious. I feel like an old fox walking on thin ice. I'm going to be very careful.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because, you know what I'm saying, these things are swirling around. Do you know what I mean, in terms of dialogues and stuff, and so it's
Sure.
always
Yeah.
it's always interesting to have that Hermes kind
Yeah,
of
for sure. Absolutely. Yeah,
kind of perspective.
for sure. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks, Gay, for obediently appearing when requested. I appreciate that.
Oh, I was lurking. Don't worry.
And I'm going to go to Eileen, who had her hand up in just a moment because Ralph put into the chat, which I loved this. Retranscendence and immanence. My totem as a philosopher is the penguin, built for paradoxical flight via downgoing into the sea.
I love that
Oh,
too.
lovely. Yeah,
I love that.
that's great.
That was very good. Eileen, sorry.
Yes, I read that comment and I did really like it, Ralph, too, because of my close affinity to birds, and penguins are kind of they're enchanting. Also,
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to pick up on something that Gay said about, and I think this is what I was saying is, so in the end of life space, working in that space, all of it is what you've been talking about, where everything slows down, where time slows down, and you create that fertile ground for whatever is going to come up. You are just, to use one of the third way's blacklisted terms, you're creating that safe space for enchantment to happen. And I think I talked about a couple weeks ago about when my mother was dying, and that something had woken me up, and I had seen it slid around right near the ceiling around the room. And I, of course, thought it was I just thought to myself, oh, it's a fairy. And I went back to sleep. And I've never doubted to this day that it was a fairy or an angel or some spiritual being, a light being of some kind. I don't know. But when I think of non-dualism, I think of some other belief systems where all outcomes are happening right now. And so when you create that fertile ground, and in the end of life space, it is to get your head out of it and be led by your heart. And in that sense, it is very wild because there's no telling what will happen, what's going to come up when you create that opportunity. And you're not thinking, but you're leading with your heart. And then, like my time blindness kicks in and all that. And I forget that that it's been several hours. But I do think it's wild no matter what the circumstance, if you take the rationality out of it, the thinking part out of it. I don't know what you think of that, because to me, if all outcomes are happening somewhere, then the enchantment is, which one is it going to be this time? Which one is going to manifest?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The only little tiny difference I would have is I don't think you need to take the thinking out of it or the rationality out of it. Depends on how you do the thinking. If you're thinking in the same way that the quality of the relationships in enchantment should be, non-possessive, if you're thinking non-possessively, that is to say, you don't want to own the concept in order to master it, in order to feel better and feel more secure. And Nietzsche said, explanation is just all about feeling secure. That's all it is. It's trying to be secure. I'm not talking about thinking in that sort of way. I'm talking about thinking that honors the phenomenon and wants to understand it better in order to honor it more.
Yeah.
And I don't see a problem with that.
Well, I'm trying to understand the meaning, and of course that's subjective, but that's what we do as humans, is make meaning out of things.
But the things have to be meaningful there. They have to be meaningful too. We can't make it out of nothing. We don't make it out of nothing. The world is a meaningful place.
Well, we can't be nothing because we're all interconnected.
Well, I'm not talking about being nothing. I'm just saying it's not just that we are creating the meaning. We're co-creating the meaning.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
Better word for that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
So I have one more question, Patrick. So with the stories that I was making up about
this is Anne, Patrick. I know that you can't see the screen, so
right.
I'm so sorry. So with the stories that I was making up about what the baby birds were thinking, why they were screaming, is that, so I hadn't thought about thinking and rationality in relationship to all of these things. So my question is, the stories that I made up, is that helpful, harmful, some form of thinking that isn't? I'm not even sure what my question is.
I think I know the direction your question is going.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
It's fine. And I think in this context, the answer to your question is very pragmatic. It's going to be pragmatic. Does the thinking, there's two kinds of thinking or imagining that would work as well in this context that are possible. One is fantasizing, which is ultimately not helpful. Okay, not going to help you understand anything more. It's just like you're spinning fantasies out of your own mind. Okay, the other is imagining your way into what you're experiencing, imagining your way more deeply into what you're experiencing, in which case you imagine, oh, the wren is communicating this or saying this now to me. And then what I mean by pragmatic is you test that against what is the result of my imagining? Does it seem, because seem is all we've got to work with,
Right.
does it seem to deepen my understanding of what's going on here, or deepen my connection with the wren, or qualitatively improve my relationship with this little bird at the time? If it does, then you can take that as true as far as it goes and for as long as it lasts. So if you're fantasizing, no. If you're imagining in the proper sense of imagining, yes.
Right. Okay. That's very helpful, because what that imagining did for me was to think about how I would feel if I was little and just experiencing things for the first time, and what that would
Why
be.
not? Why not? That's a great idea.
Right. Right. And so that helped me to then connect with them better than I would have if I hadn't done it. Okay, cool. Cool. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. And I'm aware we've taken up quite a bit of your time this evening, Patrick. So if no one else has a burning question, I think we should let you go for the rest of your evening now, and just thank you so much for the time and the wisdom and a wonderful presentation, and your generosity and counsel in this Q&A session.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry I can't see you, but I know you're there.
And there are little clapping hands from Ralph.
Oh, right. Okay.
Thank you, Patrick.
Right.
I mean, you
Thanks
can see
very
this
much.
all. You can see this all in retrospective with the video.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
That's good. That'll be good.
You'll get to see everyone. And I'll hand over to Olivia now, who will sign us out.
Yes, thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you, Izzy. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. This was just incredible. I learned so much. Our next Living One speaker will be 1 week from today, as usual, at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So that will be Friday, September 12th. And we will be welcoming back environmental historian and teacher Eric Jampa Anderson, who visited us earlier in the year to talk about Tolkien and wonder and attending. And he will be back to talk about re-enchantment through myth, story, and ritual. So hopefully we will see all of you there. For what will be a great conversation. And today, as we wrap up, I just want to introduce somebody. This is Tutsa, who is a desert tortoise at Grace Village Sanctuary. And she is 90 years old. Gay shared quite a bit about her life. She came from a rescue research facility to rescue at Grace Village Sanctuary, and she had her right arm torn off in the process at this research facility, and because she could not be reintroduced to the wild, she was going to be killed, and this is when she found herself at Grace Village. So she is a wonderful person, and we're so grateful to have her here with us, and Gay wanted to share about her and her incredible life. She now resides with 4 other rescued endangered desert tortoises at Grace Village, where she enjoys what Gay calls tortoise mash, which is kale, romaine, and strawberries mashed up together. So as always, thank you all for being here and your support, which goes directly to supporting Tutsa and all of our Grace Village Sanctuary residents. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.